tell us about Gatorade Endurance for folks who may not know about it.
Well, Gatorade Endurance is just really an amazing community of those that are focused on bringing more diversity to the table, right? Bringing more awareness. And I had worked with Gatorade Endurance for a little bit before on a program called Someone Like Me. And because I'm an endurance athlete, I formerly played football for a little bit of time, a little over a decade. And once you transition out of making those impacts and make those hits in football, you got to do something else, right? So, I'm a cyclist, I'm a runner, I'm a triathlete. I'm going to attempt to do a marathon in a couple months. But Gatorade Endurance came to me and they said, we're trying to understand a little bit more about how people like to participate in the endurance sports. And so we first did a show called Someone Like Me, where we got a lot of people together, Chris Mosier, Keontae Story, talking about how you can really start to see more people in the industry so that you can be a part of the industry. And so we continued that conversation where Gatorade Endurance created a community page. So if you go to GatoradeEndurance.com/community, we started putting out this survey because we realized it wasn't just about someone like me, it was also about these barriers. What are the ways and what are the reasons why people don't participate in endurance sports? And it has to do with time, it has to do with family and other commitments that you might have. And so we wanted to address those issues, bring some of those same people back like Chris Mosier and Keontae Story so we can talk about it and we could allow people to have a place where they could go get recommendations and reasonings, but also just kind of feel like there's a place to call home so that you can get out and do these endurance activities because it's really good for your overall physical and as well as mental health.
Yeah, and the brand, they surveyed a variety of athletes, specifically Black, LGBTQ plus, people of color, disabled athletes, to really identify and understand the barriers they might face. I got to ask you this: when I heard about this, I really love it, and the first person I thought of just popped in my head was Michael Sam, and was drafted, never got to play, was reportedly called slurs when he was training. And so I just wonder, how much do you think we have or haven't progressed from someone like Michael Sam, who's now done, with the NFL? But I remember it was an international news story. People were so outraged, and he kissed his boyfriend I think he was the last person to be drafted. And so I just think, wow, I hope someone like a Michael Sam, considering what he went through, I hope that they can see what the barrier is and kind of endure and be able to make it on that field, regardless of their sexual orientation, being Black and being LGBT. So how do you think we've progressed or not progressed since someone like Michael Sam, considering your work with Gatorade Endurance?
Well, I think years ago, we've never seen that even image on television. So I think we've progressed, but I think we have a long ways to go. And even so, from the big three, of which I played football, the world of endurance is in the same seat where we need to progress even that much more down the road. And so these barriers prevent people, but then also being able to see someone like Chris Mosier, right? And for him to be able to kind of talk about being at the starting line of a cycling race and being called those same very slurs you talked about, Michael Sam being called those slurs, but then finding ways to sort of fight that, or gaining community so that if one person says it, other people can kind of join in and help and support. That's why it's necessary to see people, but also hear their experience so that they too can overcome that. So it's not a barrier. So I believe Michael Sam, he put a mark on the map that now we can move forward from, in the same way that Chris Mosier does in the world of cycling and other types of endurance racing. So, we need these moments, we need to identify these barriers, and then we need people to rally behind so that we can continue to progress and move forward.
What barriers did you face as a young man coming up? What barriers did you face in the NFL?
I mean, look, I think, playing football, probably the barriers that I probably face is that I cared in some way, shape, or form. I was talking about it last night, and then you kind of tipped me off to it. In some way, shape, or form, I was thinking more about my education than I was thinking about the game. And so the education almost became a barrier, right? It's really not until the last couple of years that people have seen the world of sports, or the world of baseball, football, and basketball, and allowed people to do things outside of the game. That became something of which people looked at me and said, is he really committed to the game because he likes to do things that are different than actually playing the game? And so that started off very, very young. When I was in high school, I remember being on the sideline.
Because you wanted your education.
Well,
Because you wanted,
I was
wow.
on the sideline at practice, and I was talking about my anatomy physiology class. And my coach
Wow.
was like, Dhani, why are you talking about anatomy physiology class? You need to talk about, hitting the A gap, hitting the B gap, making the play over the top, the waggle, make sure you're covering your running back. Don't talk about how you have to do this, this organic chemistry or some other type of test in college, right? And so if I translate that into later on, when I was playing on the Bengals, people didn't necessarily like the fact. I think my friends liked the fact that I was traveling, and I was going overseas, and I was playing sports in different countries. I was, it was my show on Travel Channel called Dhani Tackles the Globe. And this was like 10 years ago. This is 2008. And I was going to Russia, and I was going to Nepal, and I was going to New Zealand. I was going to all these different places playing these sports. And I think people in the locker room that I'm friends with appreciated the show. Maybe the coaches didn't necessarily appreciate it because they thought I needed to be focused on the game. So nothing really had changed for me since high school in 92 to 96 through college and then into the pros. But now look at it. You got a guy like LeBron, you got like Victor Cruz. I mean, all these guys that are playing. I mean, you have Peyton Manning, Eli Manning. Obviously, they're both not playing, but they're doing a show on Monday Night Football, and they're bringing other players into this. So the progression, it takes time. You build enough catalytic energy, I like to say. You bring enough people to the table, like we're doing with Gatorade Endurance, where you can sit around and you can kind of, everything reaches a fever pitch where now everybody feels, okay, great. It's awesome that LeBron has his production company and he's playing basketball at the same time. Everybody wants to see that success both on and off the field. And I just want to see people, successful, not just in the big three, but then also in the endurance world as well.
So let me ask you this. I think one thing that I would like to see when it comes to the NFL specifically is diversity in management. And I just blows my mind. It's a predominantly black NFL players. There are no black there are no black owners in the NFL. I believe there are 2 people of color owners. So I'm always curious, as somebody who used to play for the NFL, what kind of conversations are y'all having? Like, yo, we are predominantly black, making these folks a lot of money, and there is not one black owner, not one. That's a barrier to me, and I want to see significant change with that. What were your thoughts when you were in the NFL and outside of the NFL, seeing all these players but no owners who would look like you?
I think when I was playing, I didn't really pay too much attention to it because I was just happy to be in the league and play. I think as you mature throughout the league and you start looking around and you start noticing and you start waking up and you start becoming that much more aware, you start asking questions. And I think depending upon the year, and as I've said before, things take time to progress, more of those questions start to be asked, and therefore more people are sort of demanding a response. And so I don't think that it's not going to happen. It's just at that point where now people are starting to notice that there's not a lot of diversity, whether it is in management or whether it's in ownership. Now is the time where people can put their foot forward and say, I'd like to be a part of that, because they realize it's an opportunity. A person like Jason Wright. Jason Wright is a GM for the Washington football team. Think about how long it took for him to become the GM of the Washington football team, let alone, work done I think he is a small minority owner in the Falcons. Um, so there are incremental steps, much like how do we get people to start thinking not just about the game, but about things outside of it? How do we get people to start thinking about LGBTQ plus community within the world of sports? How do we start thinking about management and ownership within teams? There was backwards thinking back in the day, and that backwards thinking has moved forward. It may not move as quickly forward as we'd like, but we've made significant change within a shorter period of time, relatively speaking. And when you have a coalition of people that start to build together in the same way that I noticed on the field that there wasn't a lot of diversity, now you start to see more coaches, you'll start to see more management, you'll start to see more owners. And it takes time. It's unfortunate that it was ever like that. But I think we're fortunate enough to see the change in real time because we're living through it right now.
Mm. What are your thoughts on the NFL having Lift Every Voice and Sing, the Black national anthem, being played before, I guess, every game?
I think it's wonderful. I mean, I think that's a change that I don't think anybody would ever thought would have ever happened, right? And so I think we need to celebrate the wins. A lot of times people say, well, there's not enough. Well, you got to start somewhere. You don't just all of a sudden do trigonometry or calculus. You got to start with 2 + 2, right? So I think it's really important in our collective thinking to believe in sort of like the incremental steps, because you don't learn things immediately. It takes time. Sure, we'd love to have that moment like the Matrix, where all of a sudden you just get booted up, and all of a sudden now you know how to do kung fu, right? I know how to fly this airplane because someone put a chip into the drive, right? We're not a
Like that blue pill or the red pill,
right?
whatever it was.
Exactly. It takes time. It takes time. So when you hear the anthem, you think about the history of the game and how so many things have changed, right? That's an important piece to an amazing jigsaw puzzle that is right now being assembled right in front of our eyes.
Can I ask you one political question, Mr. Jones?
I hope I have a great response. I'm sitting right outside of DC, so I might have to send out a phone a friend if I don't know the right answer to the question. I'm not really that politically savvy, but of course.
This is about one question for you, because I'm a big fan of yours. But I was so hurt when I saw that you endorsed the king of gentrification, Michael Bloomberg, for president. I said, what's going on? As a New Yorker, I got affected so much by stop and frisk, and I was railing against Michael Bloomberg. But what did you see in former Mayor Bloomberg that my spirit and my soul just didn't see?
Well,
New York Mayor Bloomberg, for folks who don't know. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I understand, and I think Mr. Bloomberg, I believe he acknowledged his faults in and not doing more against stop and frisk in New York City. I think that's really important in a president being able to admit where they're wrong and be willing to solve the issue that they might have implemented in the past. So I think that was one big piece. I think that when I look at the world of politics and I look at the sort of the extremes of which a lot of people exist, I saw him being sort of that fiscally conservative and socially liberal solution where more people would be able to kind of sit at the table and understanding there's things that we disagree upon, but then also working to understand the things that we do agree upon. And I think that's one of the biggest issues when it comes to politics, is that a lot of people don't come to the table because they feel as though that person's far-reaching thinking doesn't even align even close to what they believe. And I thought that Mayor Bloomberg would be able to bring those people to the table. Now, I also think, one of the other projects that he was really, really focused on was bringing capital to the African-American community. And he was doing that in a significant way. And if I could recall off the top of my head, I think it was something
Greenwood. It was the Greenwood plan.
the Greenwood Project. And I can't remember how many billions of dollars that was. And I thought that was a really critical and key component as we're thinking about the change in the landscape of football, if we're thinking about the change in the landscape of endurance sports, if we're thinking about the change in the landscape of business. There's a lot of politics and policy that has led to the income inequality. And if we are to make up and close that gap to allow more BIPOC community in order to be able to thrive in the business world, that amount of money and that amount of commitment was really instrumental to me getting behind him. So it was being able to apologize and understood what had happened, and be able to meet people at the table. And then third, Greenwood Initiative, being able to put capital out there for other people to be able to build businesses, especially the BIPOC community, where we're able to close that income equality gap.
I hear you. One thing I loved when Elizabeth Warren ethered him. Remember that in the debate?
Yeah, I mean, but to tell you the truth, that day, when she did, I mean, and we all saw the performances at the debates, and he didn't do well at all,
Right.
and everybody knows that. But I think that was also a turning point for Joe Biden, when he was able to kind of understand what was really important to so many people. And I think that was a really pivotal moment in his in his running for presidency, that I think that, if you look at the debate after that, Joe it just seemed like he took a caffeine pill and he was on his way.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that was really an instrumental moment for Joe Biden.
My guy was Secretary Julian Castro. That was my guy. And of course, that didn't get too far. Okay, before you go, one last question. I got to ask you this. Again, thinking about Gatorade Endurance, thinking about diversity. One of the things that hurts my heart is you don't see the NFL drafting from HBCUs. Deion Sanders called this out recently. What the hell is up with that? Can we change that? Because it bothers me that there's so many potential folks who want to get in the NFL, they're afraid to go to a HBCU. So is there any way that we could change that? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's complicated. The reason I say it's complicated is because it's saying that the recruits don't, it's saying that the scouts don't go to the HBCUs. The scouts might go to the HBCU. One frame of thinking might say that the scouts go to the HBCUs and they ignore seeing talent at the schools. And I don't know if that's the case or not. I think that Deion is making a big push for players to get drafted out of the HBCUs. And you're right, we have to have more players go to the HBCUs in order to play there. But there's so many choices for players to be able to pick and choose the schools that they want to be a part of. So I think it's just sort of a multi-leveled challenge. And I think Deion is bringing so much awareness by, going to coach. Like he wants to be called coach now, right? All the time he's like, "Oh, call me coach, call me coach." So I think over time we're going to see more players that are going to go to the HBCUs, and we're going to see more players that are going to get drafted to HBCUs. And I'd say that the biggest challenge is just the choice of some of the top 5 and 4-star athletes and where they decide to go. And don't forget about the name, image, and likeness that's right now as well. So players are looking to find institutions that are going to leverage their name, image, and likeness. So when we start seeing boosters of HBCUs start to support some of the incoming athletes by leveraging their name, image, and likeness, then I think we'll start to see more diversification of talent going to other places like HBCUs and then getting drafted out of those schools.